What is up, everyone? I am Jamie with Three Little Goats Homestead, and if you're new here, we are in my kitchen today because we're making some cheese. Now, we run a micro dairy in north central Arkansas where we raise Jersey cows that we milk every day, and we also raise Nigerian dwarfs that we milk every day. And so that means we generally always have a lot of milk. So with Z calving recently, she's giving us around 5 gallons a day. And because eventually she will level off a little bit, I haven't opened up any new milking slots for pickups because people do come and pick up raw milk from us off of our farm. But because I haven't opened up any slots, we generally have a lot of extra. I do have a couple families that pick up a lot of our extra because they have bottle calves or they're just a very big family and they want extra milk whenever they can get it. But occasionally I do have an overabundance, especially since I don't sell milk that's more than 24 hours old. So if I have a last minute cancellation, I put it in my other fridge, and when I have about 5 or 6 gallons of extra milk, it means it's time to make cheese. So that is what we are going to do today. I'm actually going to be making two different types of cheeses, but this video we are going to predominantly focus on cheese curds. If you've never had fresh, squeaky cheese curds, oh my gosh, they are absolutely delicious. And if they squeak, makes it even better, and that's how you know they are fresh. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to make some cheese curds. So let's get started. Now, the great thing about making cheese curds is it is a very easy beginner friendly cheese because you don't need a cheese press. If you have just a colander and some cheesecloth and something to weigh it down, that's really all you need. So if you've never made cheese before, this is probably one of the easiest ones to start with besides soft cheeses. And then I will put on the screen exactly everything that you need to have on hand for this particular recipe. And before I even turned on the camera, I sterilized my pot, gave it a good wash and a vinegar rinse, as well as all of my other equipment that I am using, because you don't want anything interfering with the culture that we're going to put into it. We want it to be easily done. Now this particular pot that I am using holds just about 4 gallons. I really need to get a bigger pot, but I think this is about the max my stove can handle right about now. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and let this milk heat up. I have my thermometer in here so I can monitor it, and I have it over at about medium heat. We're going to want to bring this to 96 degrees. And I'm going to stir this occasionally, that way we don't get any burnt milk solids at the bottom of our pot because that's kind of gross. But while this is heating up off camera, I'm going to go ahead and start my second cheese, which is just a easy queso fresco. I believe I do already have a video on making that particular cheese. So if you want to check that out afterwards, you can check that out. I do use a cheese press for that cheese. I do not use one for the cheese curds, which is why I like it, and it's very easy and beginner friendly. So I will bring you guys back when this guy hits 96 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so our temp is jumping between 93 and 97 degrees, so we're about where we need to be. If it's not exactly 96, it's okay. It's going to heat up a little bit more from the residual heat of this pot. So now that I've gotten this up to temp, the hard part begins. We're going to set a timer for 90 minutes and just leave it. You don't need to stir it. You just want to make sure that you kind of maintain that 96 degree temperature the entire time. So I'm going to put the lid on it, and I'm going to set a timer, and I'll bring you guys back in an hour and a half when we're ready for the next step. Alright, so our milk has been sitting for long enough now, so now it's time to add in our culture. I am using raw milk, so I'm actually using half of the amount of culture that the recipe calls for. I have found over the years that if I use as much culture as a recipe calls for, because they're usually going off of a store-bought milk, our cheese ends up tasting like feet. So I cut the amount of culture I use in half. So with this, I'm using a thermophilic culture, and on here it says it will set up to 4 gallons of milk, which is what I have in here, but I'm still not going to use the entire packet. So the way that I use my culture and the way you're supposed to do it, let me get this open, is you sprinkle it on, because this is actually freeze dried. And you're going to let this sit for a minute to rehydrate so it doesn't clump up when you start mixing it. So we're going to let that sit for a minute and then we will stir it in. If you are using a store-bought milk or even raw milk that's a few days old, you may want to add in a little bit of calcium chloride to it. Since most of this milk is from yesterday and the day before, I'm not going to add calcium chloride. It doesn't really need it. But we're going to give this a really, really good stir. And then we're going to set the lid back on it. And we're going to let it sit for, we're going to let this sit and ripen for about 30 minutes. Alright, so our timer just went off. So now it is time to start coagulating our cheese, which doesn't sound very appealing, but it's what's going to turn our liquid milk into some delicious cheese. So in this little container I have my rennet, and it has been diluted in about a 1/4 cup of warm water. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just start stirring this and then pour our rennet in. And I'm going to just stir this for about a minute. I want to make sure it gets fully incorporated, but I don't want to keep stirring it while the rennet actually starts kicking in, because it will start to coagulate fairly quickly. I do an up and down motion and kind of left to right, make sure everything is nice and incorporated. And then we are going to put our lid on it and let it sit for another 30 minutes. Alright, so our cheese has been, I'm just going to say, thickening for the last 30-ish minutes. So we're going to check to see if we have a clean break. And to do that, I'm just going to run my knife through and then turn the side. And you can see it separates from each other nice and clean. So we are ready to cut our curds. And I'm not too precise about this. You just want to make sure you get I think it's 3/8 size cubes. But they don't have to be perfect. And I'm not using a special tool to cut this. I'm literally using the longest knife I own to get these cut. And then to cut the horizontals, since I don't have a fancy cheese cutting thingy, I'm just going to use my slotted spoon that I have and kind of just run it down the sides and then go back and forth and give it a little jiggle. And then I'm going to let these guys kind of sit and hang out for a few minutes to let them heal so they don't lose all of their goodness. So I'm going to let them sit for a minute or two and I'll bring you back and I'll show you how I kind of get the bigger curds. Alright, so our curds have been kind of resting for a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring them up. I'm just going to use my knife. I grabbed a smaller knife this time. And I'm just going to kind of cut them up. Alright, so now that our curds are cut down, I'm going to put my thermometer back in and we're going to cook these curds. I'm going to turn my heat back on to about medium low, and we're going to cook these guys for about an hour and bring the temperature up to 116 degrees. Now you don't have to sit here and stir it continuously. Usually I'll come in and just give it a little stir every 5 to 10 minutes, make sure nothing mats up. But you want to keep an eye on that temperature because you don't want it to get too hot. But since I am very much a lazy girl, I have a tool for me to stir my cheese because I make a lot of cheese. So if you make a lot of cheese or even a lot of sauces, I put it in upside down. This may be your new best friend if I can remember how to put it together. This way, definitely this way. It's a little bit on the pricier side, but like I said, if you make a lot of cheeses or a lot of sauces, this thing is amazing. We're gonna give this power on, and we're gonna stir our curds until they come to temp. Now, this is called a stirmate. I have the long attachment, but oh my goodness, it saves me so much time because I don't have to sit here and stir curds all the time. I will link it down below if you want to check it out. But even if you don't make cheese, if you make a lot of sauces and jellies that require stirring, I've used this thing on everything from jam to tomato sauce to cheese. So, but once we come back up to temp, I'll bring you guys back. So our curds have hit 116. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. As you can see, some of them are still a little bit, so I like to call it juicy, like this guy right here. But I'm not too concerned with that. Let's do this quick stir with what we're looking for is, I'd like to have my curds just relatively dry. There are still a couple that are a little thick, but it's fine. For the most part, the majority of them are ready to go. So I'm going to grab my cheesecloth real quick and I'll be right back. Alright, so I have clean hands and I have a clean cheesecloth, and what I like to do is I actually will dip it in my pot of cheese so it kind of helps the curds from sticking to it. And then I've got a colander over here that I'm going to use to drain my curds. So I'm just going to get the cheesecloth in there, and then I'll bring you in to show you exactly what we're doing. So I'm going to just start bringing over my curds. Now, if you watched any of my previous cheese videos, you'll know that this way you can make more cheese out of it. I'm not doing that today because it's getting late in the day and I still have stuff I have to get done in my office. And from the sounds of it, we now have a milk pickup. So the whey will go probably to the pigs today, but it's also really good in smoothies too. So let me get this all transferred over and I'll bring you right back. Alrighty, I'm not ready yet. Hold please. Okay, so my curds have been hanging out in this colander for a few minutes. I had to run out and do another milk pickup. And so I'm not going to salt these guys yet. We will salt them in the next step. And this is where, if you don't have a cheese press, it's perfectly fine. I have my curds in the colander, and I'm just going to take a plate that kind of fits in my colander. I don't have like an actual like hard plate. If you do have a hard plate that fits in your colander, that's awesome. I do not. So I just use a paper plate. And I'm going to put my weight on there. That way it kind of is evenly distributed. Every hour or so I'm just going to come in and kind of just readjust it to make sure I get a nice good press on these guys. So I'm going to let these guys hang out, and when we're ready for the next step in a few hours, I'll bring you back. All right, so our cheese has been pressing for a few hours, and it is just about ready to be cut up into our curds. So I'm going to get this unwrapped. Now you can cut these curds as big or as little as you want. I like mine a little bit bigger because I like to just snack on them throughout the day. Now you're not going to get a tight press like you would in a cheese press, and it's perfectly fine. You don't want that with your cheese curds. So we're going to get these sliced up, and then we're going to salt them. All right, so I've got all of my curds chopped up. I have my cheese salt, and I'm going to give this a sprinkle. I don't really measure my salt. I tend to like my cheese curds a little bit. I like all of my cheese really a little bit on the salty side. That's just my personal preference, and I find just kind of salting it and tasting it as I go is what works best for me. But if you want to measure it out, the measurements will be down in the description box. So I'm just not that particular. Alright, y'all. So that is what I've got for you guys today. If you try out this recipe, be sure to tag us on Instagram or Facebook. I would love to see how yours turns out. And as always, if you have any ideas on what you want to see as far as cheese making, soap making, homesteading, or if you have questions in general, just leave them down in the comments below and I will get back to them. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.